have any questions so far about any of that? Okay, well let me go ahead and explain a little bit further two of the things that the narrator briefly mentioned at the end of the video. She mentioned that we're surrounded by mountains, first of all, and also that we have a quiet zone, radio quiet zone. So let me talk about those a little bit more. First of all, why are we in Green Bank, West Virginia in the first place? In 1957, when we were established here, AUI, which stands for Associated Universities Incorporated, that's our blanket corporation. They set up some observatories here in America. We were the first here on the East Coast, and so AUI decided they needed a good location for radio astronomy. One of the reasons why Green Bank is an excellent location is because we're surrounded by mountains. You probably had to drive over to get here. Once you get inside these mountains, you're really not going to have a lot of cell service. We really like our mountains. They're very functional for us because they will block out cell service, different radio waves that are being generated by towers and transmitters outside of the mountains. So they're sort of our first barrier against all that RFI, or the radio frequency interference. We're also in Pocahontas County. That's this county right here. All right. And so Pocahontas County is the third largest county in the state of West Virginia, and it has the very lowest population density of the whole state. In fact, it has the lowest population density anywhere east of the Mississippi River here. And that's because over half of our county is state and national forest. It's a lot of wilderness area, and that's the way we like it. We really like having a low population because fewer people just means there's going to be less chance that commercial development is going to move into the area. We're not going to have a lot of heavy equipment that's going to be moving in and possibly interfering with the telescopes. So we really like our low population. When you crunch the numbers down, we have about 1 person per square mile in this county. So it's really nice and rural for us here. Okay, so that's our mountains and our low population. I just wanted to sort of explain our location a little bit more. And we also have what's called the National Radio Quiet Zone. So this was established 1 year after our observatory was. And the National Radio Quiet Zone is 13,000 square miles. And essentially the way that it works, there are a lot of misconceptions that come with the quiet zone. One of them being that there can't be any radioactivity in this zone at all. That's absolutely not true. There's lots of radioactivity that goes on within these 13,000 square miles. It's not the radio silent zone, it's just the radio quiet zone. So the radio quiet zone essentially is governed by a law that regulates commercial transmission. So objects such as cell towers or transmitters, anything that's going to be a fixed transmitter set up by a company. So within this area, if a company wants to set up one of those fixed transmitters, they have to make sure that it's not sending signals to us and interfering with our data, just within this zone here. So the way that the quiet zone works, also, it's not that we go out and we tell people you can or cannot be here, or you can or cannot have that. What we do is we will actually help these companies specially design all their equipment so that they can get those services they want, but they're not sending signals in our direction. So companies usually don't find this area here within this range of mountains, within about an hour here, worth enough money to develop special towers in order to create cell service in this area. Because we have so few people, it wouldn't be worth the investment. Now, Snowshoe Mountain is a ski resort. It's about 10 miles as the crow flies. It's about a 40-minute drive, though, or half an hour from Green Bank. And up on top of Snowshoe Mountain, AT&T decided that's a high priority area. We have lots of traffic go through there all throughout the year. There's mountain bikers in the summertime, there's skiers in the wintertime, and so they wanted to put cell service from AT&T on top of that mountain. As I said, it's only 10 miles away from here, so that's really, really close. And cell towers send out lots of signals that can go kind of crazy, and it's really hard to contain those. So we actually had to take a few months out of the year, and our office here that deals with all of the RFI in the local area actually helped specially design a system of cell towers. There's small cell towers that surround that mountain there on the mountaintop that provide AT&T service right there inside Snowshoe Village. But as soon as you leave the village and you pop off the top of the mountain, there's nothing. So that was sort of our recent project, and it was actually really cool. But it cost AT&T a lot of money, but they're probably going to get a lot of return out of it as well, because now all the people who go through Snowshoe can get their service, if you have AT&T. Okay, so that's the National Radio Quiet Zone. Are there any questions about this? Yes?
Sugar Grove, is that enclosed now?
So Sugar Grove, yes, originally was a Navy observatory. They have radio telescopes like we do. Now that has since been, for a while it was closed down, it wasn't operational at all. For a while the whole town was for sale. Now we have, I believe, there are some NSA operations going on at Sugar Grove, I believe, yeah.
This is a government entity, right?
So yes and no. So in the past, we used to be known as the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, NRAO. So growing up my whole life, this place was the NRAO. 2 years ago, the government funding that we used to have, which was 100% of our yearly multi-million-dollar budget, dropped down to only 60%. And so the other 40% of our budget, we suddenly had to make up ourselves. And so we weren't sure whether we could actually stay afloat during that time. But we actually started setting aside some of our telescopes and a portion of the time on the GBT and offering it for a pretty pricey amount to private researchers. And some researchers are willing to pay that. And so whenever they will rent our telescopes from us, that helps us make up the rest of that money. We actually changed to Green Bank Observatory in 2016, just 2 years ago, because we became more independent by diversifying. Yeah, so talk about a shock growing up knowing this is the NRAO all my life, and suddenly we're the GBO. Okay, all right. Oh, any other questions? Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to some demonstrations here. Okay. So really quickly, before we go out to the bus, I have to talk about our personal electronics policy. And, oh, here it is. Our other tour guide likes to hide the camera from me. Okay, so by personal electronics, I mean just little electronics we're carrying around all the time. It can be a digital camera, a cell phone, smartwatch, anything along those lines. Our policy in a nutshell is that you can use these absolutely here on the upper site. They're no problem at all from here. The signals that come from these electronics are actually far enough away from the telescopes up here on the upper site that they're not going to reach that far. Now, there are a set of gates that bar the road, so I'll have to unlock those stripy gates and we'll go through and see the telescopes. Those gates are there to remind us that that's the point where we actually have to have electronics powered off. And the reason for that is because if we have anything with a battery in it running at that point, it's going to be creating those signals that are going to start filtering into the data that the telescopes are picking up. So we do have right here a spectrum analyzer. It sort of looks like an electrocardiogram, and this is sort of what the data will end up looking like whenever the astronomers are looking at the data the telescopes collect. It's sort of just a bunch of squiggles on a screen. So right now, we have sort of a baseline of all those little squiggles. That's just the movement of the molecules that are inside the equipment itself. So that's not anything to do with energy in the room. That's just the equipment reading itself. All right, so inside this box here, and the roof of this box, we have a little black antenna. Everybody see the screen of the spectrum analyzer antenna from there? Okay, so the spectrum analyzer screen already is showing a signal popping up toward the left-hand side. It's about 1 inch tall, a little bit taller than the rest of them. And so that little signal is actually just ambient energy that's in the room all the time. It's filtering into the box and that antenna is picking it up. We have lots of devices in this room already that are creating energy, including our projector. It's asleep, but it's still powered on. We have lots of lights. We have our exit signs. We have our computer. So all that energy is here all the time. So when a little bit of that filters into that box, the antenna can pick it up, and it will be displayed as a spike on that screen. Now, if I turn on this little digital camera, we'll be able to see the signals that it gives off. All right, so now we have multiple spikes that are about 2 inches tall. And so that's covering up some of the data if we were collecting astronomy data. So if I had this down at the GBT taking pictures of the telescope, I'd probably be ruining an astronomer's day somewhere because he would be seeing all these electronic signals that are much, much stronger than the cosmic signals he's trying to look at. So I don't want to do that. Now if I shut off this camera by turning off the battery, there we go. So all the signals have gone away again from the camera. Side note about cameras. So a lot of people sort of think that it's a no photography rule that we have. It's really just the electronics that are the issue. It's not photography at all. So if you have a film camera, an old disposable or an old 35mm film camera, you can use those all over our site. We don't mind if people take pictures. We're not being secretive and we don't want you to take pictures home. That's not the issue. It's really just that most of the time we use electronics to take pictures these days. So it's just the electronics that becomes the issue. So that's sort of a separate side note that I wanted to make there. Okay, we also have a key fob here, and if you have your key fobs with you, don't worry about it. These actually don't send off signals unless you actively press a button. Even if you have one of those new automatic transmitter key fobs, it unlocks your car when you're within 30 feet or so. Those will stop transmitting once you're far enough away from your car to save its battery. Therefore, the battery goes dormant and it's not sending out signals. So don't worry about it either way. So let's press the lock button here. So that's a really tall signal, it goes all the way to the top of the screen. Yep. So that's pretty distinct there. Okay, and finally, I have this little rascal, which is a handheld fan, has AA batteries in it. We used to sell these in our gift shop here, actually, which clearly we did not think through. People would pick them up at the gift shop before the tour and take them down on a hot summer day like today. It'd be really nice to fan yourself down by the telescopes. And signals all the way across to the top of the screen. Nothing is usable as far as the data is concerned at that point. So our astronomers said very nicely, please figure out what's creating those signals and get rid of it. So we did. We figured out it was the fan, and we had to stop selling them in our gift shop. So that's sort of the story of the electronic fan here. All right. Are there any questions about any of that so far?
Is there a main control room within the facility, or is it?
Yes. So the control room for the GBT is actually in the Jansky building, which I'll talk about when we're out on the bus. It'll be one of the first buildings we see. That's where all of our year-round employees have their offices, and there's actually a control room in that building. Now the building's 1.5 miles away from the telescope, and so the operator sitting at those computers will be running the telescope from 1.5 miles away. That remote operation is just a safety feature so that you don't have to be close to the telescope. And there's actually 1.5 miles of fiber optic cables buried underground that connect the telescope to the room to transmit that data back and forth. Yeah. Any other questions? Alrighty, well, if you all are ready, we'll go ahead and head outside. We're going to leave here and take a left, and then go all the way out the end of the hallway to our bus there.
Radioteleskopu.